Greetings, friends. Jared here with another review from Fanboys Forever, and welcome to another episode of Batman's Garage. Now, of course, Batman's Garage is the series we started recently, where we just go through and we have a look at some of the coolest representations of Batman's signature vehicle, the Batmobile, throughout the years. Not only are we going to look at Batmobiles, but we're also going to be looking at other characters' cars from the Batman universe, including some of the villains. So, of course, for this series, we're kind of taking a look at more of a forgotten line of Batmobiles from a company called Corgi. And as we mentioned in Volume 1, basically, Corgi was a company that had a big history with the Batman brand, and in the 60s and 70s, they did a lot of Batmobiles, particularly based on the 66 Batmobile. As we go forward, Corgi actually did kind of a revival line of sorts in the 2000s, probably 2005, 2006, and we're going back and looking at a few of those. Today, we're going back and actually looking at one of my absolute favorite Batman artists, Norm Breyfogle. Norm Breyfogle is kind of a legend of Batman comic books. He's sort of a forgotten legend, almost. Breyfogle really defined Batman's look through the 80s and into the early 90s, and was a big part of the character's visual look for that time. So any way that I can bring any attention to Breyfogle's work, I'm always happy to do so. In front of us here, we have two versions of the Batmobile. We have Breyfogle's original design, which is kind of space shuttle-like almost. It's very cylindrical, if you will. I'll get this. This is, of course, a little Jada miniature that I keep around for scale. And the other is more of a kind of Ferrari sort of look for the Batmobile, but sort of exaggerated. And both of these kind of define the Batmobile as being a super futuristic sports car. It certainly differentiated it from all the Batmobiles that came before, and honestly, since then, there's never been one quite like it. So let's go ahead and look at two incredible Batmobile designs. We'll start with one of Breyfogle's most popular designs, where he really put his mark on the Batmobile and wasn't trying to imitate anything that had come before. It is this beautiful Batmobile that is almost more like a spaceship, almost more cylindrical, and there's actually a good reason for that. The reason is that Breyfogle actually got his start, and one of his main illustration jobs was actually doing some manuals having to do with spacecraft for NASA. And so you can see that pop up in a lot of his designs where things kind of look more like space shuttles part of the time. So let's take a closer look. I love the bright blue color on his version of the Batmobile. It's something that we certainly don't see nowadays, but I think I have such a fondness for this because whenever I picked up a Batman comic in my childhood in the early 90s, as soon as I was old enough to start reading comics, this is the kind of Batmobile I saw first that was in some of those late 80s back issues I was seeing and some of the earliest 90s Batman stuff. So to me, this is the comic book Batmobile, just kind of de facto in my mind because it happened to be the one that I was seeing the most. You can see that it carries over some of the things from previous versions of the car. You can see there's kind of the bat head on the front, but gone is the black silhouette and ears and all of that. But we are left with those same distinctive yellowy eyes. On the sides, we have just a very bright yellow bat logo, and on the top, we have the same one. On this particular version of the car, this is like a tampographic detail that's applied. There's no sculpting here. But up here, it is actually sculpted. And that's something I really have to compliment Corgi on. They really did an incredible job with these details and added lots of things they didn't even have to. Also, something very distinctive about this era of the Batmobile is that the wheels on most of Breyfogle's designs are covered, almost to make it look like a hovercraft of some sort, even though, of course, it's never really implied to be that. Of course, he's got tires and all of that, like you would expect. But it was almost just a suggestion of that to make the car look even more futuristic and wild. This back part is actually a match for some real-world sports cars. So it was the front that's more of the science fiction-y element here. Of course, the wheels roll nicely. They're just coated with a little bit of rubber. And at the bottom, as we talked about with the previous one, we have a beautiful Norm Breyfogle-ish Batman from the 90s on the back. Each one of these cars from Corgi has its own distinctive style of Batman from that particular era. And there you see the Corgi logo with the dog right there. So that's pretty charming. Other than that, there's all sorts of vents sculpted into this particular design of the Batmobile. Here's a vent, here's some right here and over here. I like this implication of all of the different exhaust areas of the Batmobile to power a machine that would be this aerodynamic and this fast. So every one of these cars that we've looked at have some sort of action feature that really separates it from other cars in this time period. It's also important to note that Corgi Batmobiles are 1/43rd scale, and I believe Hot Wheels and things of that nature are 1/52 scale. So this is larger than a Hot Wheel. It's a little bit bigger car, so that affords them the ability to do all of these cool details. Now check this out. Here's our action feature. You can see that there's a little tab, there's a little raised portion on the top of this glass. Of course, this is just plastic, but it's just clear, made to look like the glass. And that goes back, and it allows you to see inside the cockpit. And I absolutely love the details they were able to cram in here. If we look, we can see that Batman has his steering wheel, all sorts of little details on the console. I love that they actually went to the trouble to paint those little accents yellow in there. You can see they've even sculpted in buttons on the consoles on the sides. There's little details over here as well. The seat is actually sculpted. You can actually see kind of the padding on there. On the sides, you even have kind of a lighter blue color in there. There's some monitors and screens on this side as well. And I just think, and I've said it before about some of their Batmobiles, they went to more trouble than they ever had to get these details just right. And I love it when you can see the inside of this stuff. The only thing that I think could have made it even better is if there had been maybe a little removable Batman that you could have sat in there and then just take him out. That would have been like in a seated position. They do that with some of the other Batmobiles, although I don't think that the actual figure inside is removable or anything. So I think that would have been really neat, and it's something that, you know, who knows, I may try to find a little Batman that could go in there. I think that would look pretty cool. But I absolutely love this design, and it is spectacular to have a representation of it. Corgi really did justice to the Norm Brayfogle original Batmobile design. Next up, and this is the version that we kind of saw into the 90s, and I've always had a lot of fondness for this. It is more of a, I don't know, I guess you would almost call it more of a sports car-ish version of that more cylindrical Batmobile, which was more of a tube-shaped. And this is kind of more going into that direction of making it a souped-up, high-powered sports car. You can see that he brings back some elements, like the front that has more of the bat head shape. It still doesn't have the black color, but you can see that's much stronger. The headlights right there on the sides, instead of them being the eyes of the car, are interesting. He keeps some things from the old design, like a yellow, in this case gold. I think in the comics it's always conveyed as yellow, but they wanted to do something a little different to distinguish it from the other car here at Corgi. So these are painted gold. And then the top of the car also has a bat logo, where we saw it last time. It's gold as well. So I do like that they did something a little different to distinguish it, because you could have had kind of a samey look if you didn't do that. The back of it is kind of interesting, actually. You can see that we have a bat shield on the back where the tail lights are. I actually like that. I think visually, the one of the other things that kind of ring true from the other version is those covered wheel wells, and that gives it still that hover car look. I think the biggest visual difference is this back portion right here, where you kind of have these fins kind of doing some wild stuff. It's almost like an Italian sports car if it were put on steroids. So this is a very wild look back here. I love how the wings or the fins, whatever you want to say, in the back actually fold over on themselves, and you get this really crazy silhouette, especially going forward. And artists, you know, continued to use this Batmobile even for books that Norm Brayfogle wasn't drawing. So this was a very popular version of the car. You can see we still have those vents on the sides right there, and I like the placement, how they're just very bold. And I love, like I said, the shape that you get of having all of this together. It gives the car a really interesting geometry that you don't usually get with Batmobiles. So I think this one is very, very special. You can see that the interior, even though the cockpit doesn't open this time, it's all transparent. So you can actually see a lot of the details on the inside. You can see the Bat logos on the backs of the seats. It's a two-seater, which is interesting. You can see that there's a little bit of some QC issues, I think, going on down there, where one of the Bat logos is a little messed up. Maybe Alfred sat on it the wrong way or something. But, you know, it's just one of those small details. You got to cut them some slack every now and then, I guess. And then right here, we can sort of see, and it's hard for me to get a good angle to show you guys. Yeah, it's a little bit better. You can sort of see that the steering wheel is the Bat logo. You can see that there's little details in the console. I like the interior details. They're not quite as impressive as they were on the last Breyfogle Batmobile. But keep in mind that this cockpit does not open that I know of. I'm sure you could probably get it open somehow because that's a separate plastic piece, but it is not meant to come open. So you're not meant to inspect that as closely as the previous one. Instead, the action feature for this particular car is on the back. You can see that this has a very glittery paint job, which is very nice. I really like that look. Once again, it's something that they did to differentiate it from the last one, kind of give it something special. And it's a 90s Batmobile, so, you know, yeah, hit the glitter. So check this out. The trunk pops on this one. And you get to see all of this super impressive engine detail. And I absolutely love this. I think that it's very impressive what they were able to accomplish here in such a small scale. I mean, it's hard almost for my lighting to do it justice, but you can see that there is a actual, you know, die-cast metal sculpted Bat logo in there. There's cylinders in the front, all sorts of details. You could almost say maybe this is Batman's sound system that he keeps in the trunk. But no, in seriousness, I think it's supposed to represent like the nitrous oxide tanks that Batman has on the back and different engine components. And I just find this very impressive that they were able to get so much worked into this. And I just think this looks great. This is something they didn't have to do at all to make this car worthwhile. It's something that I don't think a lot of companies would do. So I think Corgi going the extra mile made their Batmobiles stand out in a way that other companies just haven't been able to since. I think the release date on this was 2006 or so. And it's funny to think, but I've not been, 2005, I believe, according to the packaging. But it's funny to think that they've not really been able to have a line of comic book Batmobiles with that sort of play mechanic sense, that sort of attention to detail. It's kind of unbelievable that they went that far 15 years ago, so as of the filming of this video. So it is very impressive. Also, I would be remiss not to show you the bottom of the car. You can see that we have a very Norm Breyfogle kind of, maybe Kelly Jones, I'm not really sure, Batman from the 90s here. This certainly represents Batman as he went a little further into the 90s and sort of Batman's more beefy era, I guess. Great car, definitely one of my favorites out of this collection. And a quick comparison with the other Breyfogle Batmobile. We can see that the both of them definitely have visual cues and similarities that kind of have them resemble each other and pretty strongly. You can see that they're both a blue color, and I think the only reason that they're not the same blue is that Corgi themselves wanted to differentiate a little bit and make sure that they were very much their own thing. You can see that there is a really strong glitter hit to this one. There is glitter in this one as well. It's not quite as strong as what we're seeing here, but it's the shades of blue that are the biggest variants here, definitely. I also like to point out how the backs are very, very different. And, you know, there is no turbine on the back of this Batmobile, and this one, of course, has the classical turbine that we're always used to seeing. On the sides, of course, like I pointed out earlier, they both have the hover wheel wells. The cockpits are very different. This one overall, the first Breyfogle Batmobile, is much more aerodynamic. This one is much more of kind of the Italian sports car. We can see that the Bat logos are similarly placed on the sides and on the top of the car. And like I said earlier, the biggest difference does appear to be the fins in the back and how that was handled. But overall, these are a really nice complement to one another, and it would be really hard for me to imagine owning just one, and it's nice to have both of the distinct looks. Just a little scale comparison here. Here we have one of the Jada miniatures, and I think it looks pretty nice with these. I think that he scales a little more appropriately with this one though, because as I noted earlier, this is a one-seater Batmobile. You can just open that up. You can see that it's not totally unreasonable to think that this Batman could get in there. So if you had a Jada Mini, then you could probably pose this beside of it pretty comfortably. One thing I will say is that this one, it's not quite as plausible anymore because they're trying to cram more into here and the seats are smaller as a result. So he ends up being a little too big for this, making me believe that this version of the Batmobile should be a little larger than what they've scaled it as here, or they've made this a little too large perhaps. But in all honesty, really, since this is a two-seater, it should be quite a bit wider than this version of the car. So that would be probably the one weakness, I would say, in terms of scale, that you would actually have to see a more dramatic size difference to make that make sense. All right, friends, I hope you've enjoyed this volume of Batman's Garage. Of course, stick with me. We're going to be looking at many other representations of Batman's classic car as we go through. And like I said, we're also going to be seeing some representations of cars that have been driven by allies and enemies alike. So keep an eye out for that. And as always, guys, we appreciate each and every subscriber that we can get. Of course, we're a small channel. We appreciate all of your support and comments and likes. They mean the world to us. So please keep those coming in. They excite us to death to hear from you guys, hear any kind of comment or question that you have. And as for the comments today, I would ask, which one of these do you think is better? Honestly, for me, I can't really choose. I can tell you that this version has a little bit more of a nostalgia factor for me because I was seeing that one more as a kid. As a design, maybe I think that this one's a little more unique and makes a bigger statement though, especially with the fins in the back and some of the Italian sports car kind of tendencies. But I'm not really sure. Maybe you guys can help me decide below. Anyway, though, guys, until next time, remember, be safe out there. God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Take care.